Urgent, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like all presidential pardons are going to be revoked. The Congressional Committee found that Biden had no idea about at least 7,760 pardons he had signed. Now we have a complete list of those whom the Democrats themselves considered criminals and wanted to protect. But let's start with an assassination attempt, and another one, yet another attempt. This time the left tried to kill the United States Attorney General Pam Bondi. Well, one madman, for example, offered $45,000 for a hole in her head and posted it on social media.
All right, breaking news, the start of a new hour. The FBI arrested a suspect in a gruesome murder-for-hire plot against Attorney General Pam Bondi, marking another threat of political violence in America.
According to authorities, in this affidavit that we just saw a couple of hours ago after it was recently unsealed, he allegedly offered a reward of $45,000. The post on TikTok features a photo of the Attorney General with a sniper's red dot reading, "Wanted Pam Bondi, reward $45,000, dead or alive, preferably dead." That's a quote.
The Democrats have created such an atmosphere of hatred in the country that people who are easily influenced, well, there are people who are just easily manipulated, brainwashed. You know, there's a desire that arises, a desire to kill everyone involved in this horror, this nightmare that Trump and the Trumpists brought, meaning you and I brought to our country. Now listen, these are two organizations, media organizations, major ones, probably among the top 5 or 10 largest in the country, that are competing for the title of the biggest anti-Trump outlet. So they say to each other, what, are they less anti-Trump than we are? So naturally, that's BSNBS and Cable News Network. So, in other words, to put it in terms we can understand, I'm about to tell you what the snake in the grass says about the viper.
And now Cable News Network eagerly pays a Trump supporter to lie on Cable News Network every day and night for Donald Trump. Cable News Network did this during Trump's first presidential campaign and presidency. Cable News Network regularly paid Trump supporters to lie about Trump on Cable News Network, but then Cable News Network management realized it was a mistake and they stopped doing it. They stopped paying for lies.
So Cable News Network, one of the two most vile anti-Trump propaganda organizations, it turns out, was paying Trump's agents to lie to their viewers.
But then Cable News Network got a new head of Cable News Network in the last 3 years, hired by the owner and operator of Cable News Network, who supports Trump. An Englishman who thinks that paying Scott Jennings to lie about Donald Trump is money very well spent. Scott Jennings, who used to be an aide to Senator Mitch McConnell, wasn't always a fierce, lying supporter of Trump. At first, he could criticize some of Trump's extreme positions on television, but Scott Jennings soon realized where the money was.
Explaining on Cable News Network, on the panel, they invite 5 people to discuss something, and at some point they decided that out of the 5, they would drop one of the die-hard Democrats and now usually include one Republican for balance. But even that is too much for the left to handle. Someone responds to their fabrications and lies and calmly says, guys, have you lost your minds or what? The facts are exactly the opposite. This is outrageous. It's outrageous that someone would talk about facts when we're talking about emotions. This needs to stop. Stop it. Like Beria, this needs to stop. We really love diversity, say the liberals. Just, God forbid, diversity of opinions. We won't allow that. There's only one opinion, ours.
That's how bad the television they make over there is. The show that Scott Jennings visits most often airs opposite this program. And on a good night, that show gets about half the audience of this program. This program usually has an audience 3 times larger than that of the terrible, terrible television.
So it turns out that the other show airs at the same time as his show, and they are competitors. Their ratings are terrible, terrible, terrible. No viewers. All lies and deception.
Scott Jennings. So, Scott Jennings appears on a ridiculously degraded version of Cable News Network, which is run by a man who believes in lying for the benefit of Donald Trump. On television, this is considered an honorable occupation and you should be paid for it. And
Me personally? Personally, I'm not a good person. No, really not a good one. I like it when the spiders in the jar fight and start eating each other. And you.
Back. Moving to Washington, District of Columbia questions about President Biden's health continue to grow. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has referred President Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, to the District of Columbia Medical Board, accusing him of deliberately, knowingly, and maliciously concealing Joe Biden's mental decline. James Comer's letter asks the board to investigate whether Dr. O'Connor misled the public, concealed treatment, or violated medical ethics. A 4-month congressional investigation interviewed 14 of Biden's aides. It is reported that Dr. O'Connor invoked the Fifth Amendment on every question about Biden's mental health. According to James Comer's account, Dr. O'Connor ignored calls for cognitive testing after Biden's poor performance in the June 2024 debate. Despite these concerns, Dr. O's February report. Connor described President Biden as healthy, active, and robust. And in the July statement, he was called mentally superior. Are you kidding? Mentally superior?
They rely on doctors for deception, but this is more than just deception. From my point of view, this is treason. That's probably true. Or maybe it does qualify, I don't know, but if I understand the situation correctly, of course. Yes, gentlemen, don't pay attention to the jerks who write that all the Republicans do is talk, that no one has been put in jail there, as they say, and no one will be. These people are either very stupid, yes, and can't understand the difference between the Stalinist system of punishment and a state governed by the rule of law, or they're trying for very little money, either from the Democratic Party or from Putin, to sow discord and doubt in your minds, but they're even too dumb for that.
Biden. Now, after the investigation, we found out that Biden not only underwent medical procedures that were kept secret, but also secretly met with Parkinson's disease specialist Dr. Kevin Conard, as well as neurologist Dr. Tom Pitts, who said that he had noticeable changes. The special counsel previously described Biden as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The United States House Oversight Committee has declared all of President Biden's executive actions invalid, including all his pardons, which were not actually made by President Biden himself, but by White House staff who used an Autopen behind his back. The committee is demanding an immediate investigation from Attorney General Pam Bondi. Here is what it says. We urge the university to conduct a thorough review of these executive actions and carefully investigate Biden's key aides who invoked the Fifth Amendment to hide their involvement in the cover-up.
This is not yet the cancellation of all the executive orders signed by Biden, and so, pardons what we call them here, this is the first step. A congressional committee investigated, reached a conclusion, and is now sending the case to the prosecutor's office, not the investigators. They are not prosecutors. Well, that means, of course, that things are heading in that direction. Well, at least that's how it is. The commission's recommendation is to cancel everything that Biden has signed, at least in the last 3 to 4 months. I think that's what they mean. After the debates, after it became clear to all the Democrats that Biden is leaving, and most likely the Democrats will lose the White House, they started doing some fantastic things. And this is being canceled, or will be canceled, or they will try to cancel it not because each of them is being challenged, but because the commission thinks so. This must be proven again, and they'll bring in doctors, psychiatrists, and specialists. That due to his mental health, Biden, for the last 3 to 4 months after the debates with Trump, was not able to understand what was being presented to him. According to the commission, they simply didn't even tell him anything. So Ben Johnson conducted an interview with the chairman of the Congressional Oversight Committee. That's James Comer. I've mentioned him several times and shared different interviews and Q&As with him. I want you to listen to this long-awaited news, so to speak. The wheels of justice turn very slowly once again. With Stalin and Chinggis Khan, everything was fast, but with us, thank God, everything takes time. Everything needs to be dug up. So, and also in such a way as not to violate rights or the law, and then to prove it in court. And many of you think it's stupid, yes, but it just means that you gentlemen don't understand the world we live in. It's not perfect, but it's better organized than anything that was invented before. I hope that in the future we'll have something even better. I mean, the structure of society. By the way, I talk about this on the channel Roadmap to Freedom. Try to find it on YouTube as well. And by the way, the link will be in the description. We always include it, but for now, this is what we have. It's better than anything before. That's right, it's better than anything before.
At what point do you determine what is legal and what is illegal? How illegal has Joe Biden's presidency been?
Well, we just focused on pardons and executive orders. All the documents that were signed by Autopen, which by definition are legal documents, documents that whether it's recording a deed in court, buying real estate, or, when you sign a subpoena in court, you have to use an ink pen. But in the end, yes, the investigation concerned, in addition to the unauthorized use of the Autopen, the general and mental condition of Joe Biden. Was he even aware of what his staff was doing? Besides whether it was legal, did he even know? Was he capable of understanding it? And while reading the report, you see we involved his whole inner circle. And many of these interrogations lasted all day. These were hours and hours of questioning. Of course, we have transcripts. We also have audio recordings. This was what the January 6th committee said as a precedent, and now they regret it because we have audio recordings of people like Dr. When
Conor was asked, "Have you ever been told to lie about Joe Biden's health?" and he invoked the Fifth Amendment.
The White House doctor couldn't answer the question of whether he lied about Joe Biden's health, so that Americans will be able to see this. And in the end, all 12 of these staff members are from the inner circle, and we're talking about 2 chiefs of staff. We're talking about his executive secretaries. We're talking about people who were identified as those who use the Autopen. None of them ever spoke directly with Joe Biden except for Jeff Zients. And, there's no consistent way of using the Autopen. There's no chain of custody. There were people who operated the Autopen, and they said they could go weeks without seeing Joe Biden, but during that time, they were signing legal documents with the Autopen. I believe the evidence is there. We did the hard work, the tedious part of the investigation, whether it was Congress or a regular Department of Justice investigation. We have now formalized the report. It came out, 4 or 5 hours ago. Not a single Democrat or media personality is disputing any of this. We're handing this over to Pam Bondi on a silver platter and saying the investigation is complete. We believe there should be accountability, that there should be accountability. there is evidence, and it will stand up in court. If these pardons are declared invalid by the Ministry of Justice, the case will most likely reach the Supreme Court. The evidence is irrefutable. Testimonies, emails, all the evidence we have will stand up in the Supreme Court. So,
Comer's comments are encouraging. Congress has conducted hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of interviews with everyone who knew something, participated, was technically involved, carried out, or gave orders. In Biden's White House, they identified a group of, well, about a dozen, I think, as I understand it, people, including the president's wife, Jill Biden, who have practically usurped power, and on behalf of the president, who is completely incapable. And apparently, without his consent and without his understanding of what's going on, they are running our country. How serious? A drunken sailor? Subtitles by Dima Torzak. For example, Trump, after all that, from issuing the order to never again punish anyone who voted because of me. Yes, whatever they did, killed, cut, drank blood, I know, deceived, and so on. That is the very thing that supposedly Biden signed in the last 3 months. Well, actually, supposedly this participant signed what is written. We know that this is exactly what is written. Whatever this person did during such and such a period, everything is forgiven. Everything is forgiven. I think that's such a pardon, such a clemency. I don't even know if there are any like that in the United States. I tried to look for it, but I didn't find anything like that. They pardon for something specific, or sometimes they don't even pardon. They just reduce the sentence or cancel it or something else. It's rare when they just pardon. But let's say out of 100 orders to reduce sentences, maybe there are 5 pardons. But let me tell you how many of these bastards have arranged. So, for the last 3 months, they kept signing, and they signed by the thousands. So, a full indulgence for people who lied, manipulated, threw us in jail, and ruined the lives of political opponents of the Democratic Party.
with Trump, when he pardons someone, he holds a press conference. Yes, and he talks about it. And, well, you know, I didn't always agree with 100% of the pardons President Trump issued, but I know he issues them. He does it. He does. Yeah. With Joe Biden, there's no evidence that he had any idea. He clearly knew his family would get a pardon. But in the end, you're talking about thousands of pardons. He himself said in an interview with the New York Times that he didn't review every pardon. Well, that's already a problem, because only the president of the United States, not the vice president, not the chief of staff, only the president of the United States has the authority to grant a pardon.
Very quickly, we have an article from the New York Times that says Jeff Zayans responded to everyone and said, "I approve the pardon." Well, that's not in the Constitution, brother. So, does this mean that Dr. Fauci, is this specifically about pardoning Fauci, or about the series of pardons that were announced? So you're saying you'd pardon Fauci? No exceptions? And we will defend in court and at any trial in any court in the country that the pardon of Dr. Fauci is invalid.
Yes, I mean it. Look, in the end, you need to have a formal process for the Autopen. And, you know, they're trying to say, well, some of them were approved verbally. For some, we had a note. There are emails from Biden's Department of Justice, from Merrick Garland's Department of Justice to Biden's inner circle, saying you need to be careful with the use of the Autopen, so often on legal forms. And then there are other emails where the president actually knew that this person had been granted amnesty. And I mean, like, his own. The Department of Justice is concerned that, first of all, there is excessive unauthorized use of the Autopen, and secondly, that the President of the United States has no idea who is being pardoned by him. Unnamed staff members who, you know, use the Autopen. And when Donald Trump says this was an Autopen presidency, that's what we've seen over the past 3 months. Since the debates, the catastrophic debates, when Joe Biden had to drop out of the race.
Up until the transfer of power from Biden to Trump, it would be quite accurate to say that this was an Autopen presidency. Let's break it down, starting with Biden's failure at the Donald debates. Remember that, right? It became clear Trump would likely be president, though there was a slight chance he wouldn't. They'll come up with someone, they'll find somebody, they'll put someone in instead of Biden. They were confused and realized there was a 90% chance Trump would come to the White House. And the Democrats started carefully covering up and erasing traces of criminal activity, burning papers, wiping computers like Hillary did. Bleach, there's a program by that name, not the laundry product, just bleach. So they started writing so-called pardons for themselves, supposedly from the president, signed in Biden's name over 4 years. Now, here come some numbers. 8,064 presidential pardons, an absolute record in United States history, an absolute record in history. For comparison, Biden was in office for 4 years. In the first 4 years of his presidency, Ronald Reagan signed 213 pardons. Ronald Reagan, that's 213, George Bush Sr., 77 Clinton's first 4 years as president, 56, and Biden, 8,064. But of course, the most interesting thing, the most important thing, isn't even how many he signed overall, but how many he signed in the last 3 months, supposedly signed, supposedly gave the order to supposedly sign, after it became clear following the debates that he just can't handle it anymore. That is his disaster on television when not only those who wanted to see it saw it, but everyone else too, that he is absolutely senile, feeble-minded, and so on, by another person, not him, signed. 7,760 presidential pardons in 3 months, gentlemen. Yes, 90 days. 7,760. That means 96% of all of Biden's pardons were signed when we know for sure that Biden was already out of it. Literally out of it.
When it comes to Jill Biden's guilt, I want to talk about Jill A. and Tony Bernala, because there is an entire department in the administration that was run by Jill. We not only have funny photos where she sits in the president's chair wearing the president's jacket that says president. No one elected Jill Biden, but she just acted as the de facto president. And many reports talk about this. And she even held a cabinet meeting. Mr. Chairman?
The president's wife, meaning the person he slept with, well, shared his bed, as they say, yes. Based on whether she shared his bed or not. So she took the seat of the leader of the most powerful country in human history and made epoch-making decisions about the fate of the world. Our system is seriously out of order if something like this can be allowed. Seriously out of order. Yes, in history, yes, there were women who gained power because of their closeness to the leader. Well, there was Yekaterina the Great, yes, but she organized a coup against her husband. Maria Medici became a regent after the death of her husband. That was Henry for her husband. She seized power through intrigue. Eva Perón then. But even before Juan's death, she was practically the second most important person in the state. Cleopatra again, a great schemer and an amazing diplomat. And also Empress Cixi in China was just the emperor's concubine, not his wife. But through palace intrigues, there were many of them, there were 20 or 30 of them, yes. But through palace intrigues and a genius for organizing alliances and persuading people, she basically ruled the Celestial Empire for 3 decades. Well, all of them did something before that, well, either organized coups or seized power. And what did Jill do? As a continuation, she hid and convinced a dozen close associates to hide that Joe had cancer and that he was also senile. But with Jill, the Democratic Party was ready to hide it, and the press gladly covered it up. And a million officials who closed ranks simply so they wouldn't lose their source of income.
Well, she played a significant role. We didn't bring Jill Biden because it would have taken too much time, and time is worth its weight in gold. Because you have a situation where many of these people in the deep state can't be held accountable. I know that a lot of people are frustrated that no one has been arrested yet or anything like that. Well, many of them were pardoned. Well, now, with our investigation, if the Department of Justice does what we recommended, the pardons will be declared invalid. So nothing is stopping the Department of Justice from going after the deep state and prosecuting Dr. Fauci for everything he put us through. Or the January 6th committee for falsifying documents, or the Biden family for taking millions from our enemies, lying about it, and not paying taxes. I mean, the list of people who got an automatic pardon on the way out just goes on and on. And again, there's no chain of custody. Each staff member basically gave a different explanation of how the Autopen should be used. And I don't think that would hold up. If you were running a Fortune 500 company and acted like that, I don't think that would hold up in a district court in any state in America. Not to mention presidential power pardons and how it was carried out by the Biden administration.
Should Dr. Joe Biden, Dr. O'Connell lose their license?
I think he'll have to explain why they didn't give Joe Biden a cognitive test, or if they did give Joe Biden a cognitive test and he didn't pass it. He'll have to explain why they didn't check Joe Biden for prostate cancer, or if they did check Joe Biden for prostate cancer and he had it and they lied about it. And I think he'll also have to say, why did you keep writing that he was in excellent mental and physical shape? Are you in excellent mental shape? You can see with your own eyes that it's not true. Now, these are all questions we've tried to ask him, and he invoked the Fifth Amendment to avoid self-incrimination. Now, if the Attorney General conducts an investigation, he won't have so many options. And if he continues to invoke the Fifth Amendment, then I think he should lose his license.
Of the United States Constitution, the accused is not required to answer questions. He can refuse. And it's the prosecution's job to prove to the court without his words, without his testimony, that he is guilty of something. This brilliant rule came from Britain. See, even something good can come from Britain, right? Yes, thank you to the British. Actually, a lot of good things have come from Britain. But the way the Democrats have twisted our laws, our morals, into an institution it's impossible to overestimate.
A pardon for the entire January 6th committee and every witness. Now, I think that's possible. The most incriminating pardon. That's really something. I mean, there's no historical precedent for that. We've seen Bill Clinton pardon his degenerate family members. We've seen presidents hand out pardons to people they had business relationships with. We've never seen anything like this. Why did it happen, and what happens next?
Well, I didn't know when he first issued the pardon, but now so much information has come out. Now that we have the Department of Justice, now that we have people like Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and John Ratcliffe, who are exposing a lot of corruption in the deep state. But it seems that the January 6th committee withheld information, that they were not honest in their investigative report. And that's one thing. The Democrats are crying and shouting, the liberal media, they're constantly attacking me, but they have never challenged a single thing that we included in the final report. Never. They never challenged the influence of the Biden family. They got tens of millions from our global adversaries and didn't pay taxes on it. They didn't mention the Biden Autopen scandal, but almost everything in the January 6th report is disputed. And now there's no one to defend it. Adam Schiff and Adam Kinzinger, who keep going, they're just tweeting, trying to change the narrative. But in the end, if they're caught being dishonest and they signed their names on the congressional report, if they lied about FBI agents possibly inciting the crowd and all that, why? Why do they do it? They shouldn't be forgiven. They shouldn't be protected from being held accountable for lying to the people. I don't know if they lied or not, but the more information comes out, I've seen enough from Adam Schiff to not believe anything he says. And the fact that Joe Biden pardoned them with an Autopen on the way out, that looks to me like a pretty possible admission of guilt.
It looks like the Democrats made lists of everyone who lied, forged, concealed, and manipulated, and they all got presidential pardons signed without the president's involvement at all. Fortunately, he was already out of it and pretty far gone and didn't understand anything at all. Just didn't understand anything at all. Let me remind you that the entire United States Democratic Party voted to nominate Charismatic for another term as president. They weren't just letting him finish his term, they nominated him one more time. He was the Democratic Party's candidate in the 2024 election. Only by Obama's maneuver, as I understand, did they force him into the preliminary debates to show the Democratic Party and the world he's senile, so they could remove him, since otherwise they couldn't. Yes, they removed him brilliantly. Well, in such a truly democratic way, just like the Democratic Party does everything. The most democratic party in the world. Millions of people didn't notice that he was stumbling over his words. It's possible that he doesn't know which way to leave the stage, or that he's constantly falling off the stage. He leaves, falls, climbs up the airplane stairs, falls once, falls a second time, the plane comes out, he falls a third time, goes somewhere, falls again, falls. But that's all absolutely normal. And what about the fact that he can't answer any questions? Half the country and all the left-wing press didn't notice anything. How is that possible? Tell me, please, how is that possible? So they wanted a senile old man to run the country for millions of illegals to enter the country, including murderers, thieves, rapists, and lunatics, as we already know from Venezuela. They bust people from mental institutions and push them over our border. They wanted not Venezuelans, but American Democrats wanted for there to be robberies, assaults, and murders in American cities. They wanted China to bring tons of fentanyl into the United States. They wanted their children to learn not chemistry and history in schools, but the right of every child to change from a man to a woman or a woman to a man. Do you understand anything? Do they? Yes, I mean Democratic Party voters. As a woman, that makes sense. Complete idiots. Maybe they're their own enemies, or maybe they hate themselves, their children, their race, their culture, so much that they want to destroy themselves. Stab in the head, in the stomach, in the legs, anywhere.
We kept hearing about Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and Adam Schiff being involved in witness tampering. And some of the ways they operated, for example, persuading and then forcing some witnesses to give certain testimony, including, but not limited to, completely fabricated stories like Trump trying to break through the Secret Service like the Incredible Hulk and grab the steering wheel of the limousine. These are just completely made-up stories.
Here's what I can tell you. You have to hold them accountable if they lied. Because whoever the next chairman of the Oversight Committee is, if it's Jamie Raskin, who is one of the biggest liars ever to serve in Congress, I hope you're writing this down, Vinny. If he gets the right to issue subpoenas and the ability to publish reports again, and he knows he managed to avoid accountability on the January 6th committee because he was on the January 6th committee and wasn't held accountable, so he'll keep doing it. So I think this is the Autopen investigation, the evidence that was presented. I think this will go down in history as one of the most significant and successful investigations by Congress. I just hope that the Department of Justice will now take this up and hold these people accountable, because we have a lot of wrongs to right. And there are still a lot of problems to solve, both in the deep state and in Congress. And they won't be solved unless people are held accountable.
And if they have fake pardons?
Well, we handed all of this over to the Department of Justice. Right now, Laudermilk is doing a good job with his investigation. He's leading that investigation. The biggest problem we face in Congress when conducting investigations is access to information. And I think the Department of Justice should work with Laudermilk. They need to collaborate more with me and Jim Jordan in future investigations to try to get this information. We could never get it from Merrick Garland's Department of Justice and make criminal referrals, release it in the report, and then the Department of Justice should prosecute these people. So,
Well, you know what, Chairman? To go after Chairman James Comer, there are 300,000 people here who follow Representative Comer here on his official account. He also has personal accounts. Great observation from the Republican Party. You know what's really great about your work here, Mr. Chairman? It's that Kamala Harris is running again. Like Hunter Biden doing podcast interviews.
This incredible rat pack that you've exposed here, they won't go away. That's all they have.
So,
it's really important work. You are the person who should do this. You have always been that person. And it's an honor for us to have you here and talk about it.
that's right. Kamala Harris, part of all this mess, is hinting that she wants to run for president again. So I want to go to Paris again. Have you already been there? No, I already wanted to go once. There. And the same Adam Schiff. Dr. Fauci and the other Raskins. It slipped by since they weren't punished a second time. Expect more and more lies, manipulation, and a harsh power grab. So to everyone who says, I want it faster, I also want it faster. But even more, I want them not to slip off the hook, On that note, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye until we meet again.